Plane carrying more than 150 passengers from Orlando to Los Angeles forced to make an emergency landing in Texas after a man became terribly ill. The unexpected landing leaving passengers stranded for 16 hours. Much of that time, no food, no water, no blankets, left to sleep on a floor overnight. The airline says once the plane was on the ground, they then discovered a mechanical problem which further delayed the flight.
The aircraft is heavy at that time, still has all the fuel on it and everything else. And when they do that, they need to go back through and make sure that that everything's working and everything's proper at that point.
So what's the legal recourse for a passenger put in a situation like this, if any at all? Let's bring in our legal panel, criminal defense attorney Keith Sullivan and former federal prosecutor Anne-Marie McAvoy. All right, Keith, look, things happen, and there are events beyond the control of an airline, right?
That's correct. And in fact, the DOT, the U.S. Department of Transportation website, states that airlines are subject to change their schedule and are not required to stick to and maintain their schedule, and that flyers and passengers should be aware of this and make other provisions if time is of the essence. There are just so many things that can go wrong when a man-made multi-million-dollar bird is up in the plane. Forget about the technical and the mechanical issues, but then you have weather to contest with. And then you also have, which happened in this case, the poor situation of a death. I mean, I understand people are inconvenienced. I get it. I travel all the time for lectures and speeches, and I get there hours in advance because of these concerns.
Anne-Marie, all right, so stuff happens. You have to stop in Midland, Texas. No hotels have availability for 150 people, so on and so forth. But there are some things that an airline can do to make those passengers stranded in a terminal more comfortable, aren't there?
Absolutely. There certainly should be. I mean, this is something that is a foreseeable event. You know, passengers can get sick on an airplane. That's something that the airline has to realize can happen. They have a plane like this. They have all of these people, including children. One of the children even had autism. And to dump them there and then just say this isn't our problem is not the answer. And I think that the airlines should be held responsible. Now, the problem is that the Passenger Bill of Rights doesn't necessarily cover specifically, this situation because it gives them all kinds of outs, unfortunately. And I think what we need to do is bring this to light, put pressure on the airlines, and make sure that this does get added so that they can't do this again. And show and maybe boycott United. If this is if this is an airline that did this, then make sure that people are aware of this. It worked with JetBlue, and they made changes as a result of the pressure that was put upon them.
I mean, look, human decency would suggest at least feed them, get them liquids and so forth. And you know, I've been reading through some of the comments of the passengers. They insist that it wasn't until one man demanded there has to be a 24-hour pizza parlor here somewhere that suddenly a couple of hours later, 20 pizzas show up. But for that man, it wouldn't have happened. Keith, is there any legal recourse here for the passengers?
Well, Greg, the only legal recourse, as Anne-Marie touched on and eloquently laid out, is the Passenger Bill of Rights. That is the only federal regulation that covers all of the airlines. Every airline has its own personal and individual policy on how to handle these things.
So what does that mean? They can or cannot sue?
They won't be able to sue. They'll get a $75 voucher, a mea culpa, we're sorry. Could they have handled it better? Sure. But we have to realize, look, this was a medical emergency. Keep in mind, a man died over this. A man died on the plane. They don't want to land in this one-horse town and be stuck in the,
Anne-Marie, and when you buy a ticket, there's all this little tiny fine print on it, conditions and exceptions, and you agree to it. But that's a contract of adhesion, as you learned in law school, because you had no ability to negotiate it, so it's arguably unenforceable and invalid. But nevertheless, a lawsuit, what do you think?
Well, people could try. The problem is, unfortunately, they're probably going to want a lawyer to represent them, and that costs money to do. So that's the problem here. But maybe if some of them got together, I think that they may have a grounds here. I mean, this was, in a sense, cruel and unusual punishment, what they've done to these passengers,
How about
including children.
negligent infliction of emotional distress? How about that?
Absolutely. That's right. And I think it would be worth a shot here, and it would raise the awareness. And I think the legislators need to get involved and change the regulations and change the Bill of Rights so that passengers do have rights in situations like this, and airlines make provisions in advance in case something like this happens.
Keith, I don't want to beat up on the airline here. Everybody lived through this ordeal except arguably, we don't really know the condition of the gentleman who may have passed away, may be in critical condition. We just don't know, who was on board the flight and actually was the reason why they had to land in Midland, Texas as an emergency, and then the mechanical failure down there. But, you know, at least the airline made sure that nobody was injured or died.
That's correct. And look, we have to remember that the stewardess and the pilots, they're not hotel concierge of a five-star Waldorf Astoria. They basically did the best they could under the circumstances. Maybe the more could have been done, but we need to move on and just look. These airlines, if you look at the airline grid and you look at how many planes are flying across the country at any given moment in time, it's amazing that we don't have more problems.
They actually have an incredibly good record, most airlines.
Exactly.
All right, Keith Sullivan, Anne Marie McAvoy, good to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.